Kurt. Good to see you today.
Yep, you too, Mary. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. I'll just conduct a brief introduction of Kurt, and then we'll launch into our interview. So Kurt is a multifaceted professional, deeply involved in community engagement, disability advocacy, and media production. He co-hosts programs such as Ability MKE Now, which MKE is for Milwaukee, and Prosperity Pathways on River West Radio, focusing on topics related to disability awareness and community prosperity. In addition to his media endeavors, Kurt serves as board member for various organizations, including the Wisconsin Council on Physical Disabilities and the Pewaukee Lake Water Ski Club. All right. So, Kurt, can you tell us about your journey? What inspired you to become an advocate for disability awareness and community inclusion?
Well, it truly is giving credit to the entire life journey. I was born into a family where my parents and grandparents were members of Lions International, Lioness, Knights of Columbus, Ladies of Columbus. So that kind of brought me in some childhood experiences with the blind and visually impaired community and the community of people that we would now say people with really more intellectual disabilities, but folks would also say, they say now the IDD community, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And then the other part of it is, a piece of it is with Optimus International. I'm also a member of Optimus International, and they have a great contest for scholarships for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. So everything kind of pieces together in life experiences. And then the real clincher has been my flair with the Pewaukee Lake Water Ski Club. We are entering into, having 36 years of providing adaptive water skiing to adults with disabilities. And, in kind of my flair of the last decade, we've expanded it, that it's not just adults with disabilities, it's, youth as well, youth with disabilities. And so what happened 10 years ago is I set up, with our club, we do water ski shows. And so we had been doing a separate event away from our shows to do this skiing with people with disabilities, and I wanted to showcase it at our show. And two of our friends objected. And so what happened was what I set to do on a night didn't work out. It didn't happen. So then my family and I regrouped, and we decided we're going to make this something not to grow adaptive water skiing entirely, but then also work with show ski organizations that this element of putting people with disabilities in water ski shows would happen. And even with our Pewaukee Lake Water Ski Club, we even turned a corner that now today with the Pewaukee Lake Water Ski Club, the public can know, if you're someone with a disability who wants to be a part of our Pewaukee Lake Water Ski Club and be a part of our shows, we are a club that can make that happen. And just the whole process of what it took, to turn that corner and do what I call now, being in barrier demolition, because that one night was a barrier, and I could have just succumbed and said, "Oh well, it's not going to work." But people with disabilities taught me enough about how they're always in our society up against these barriers that I guess they taught me a little bit of how to persist, through that situation, and to have a predictable way, that not really knowing exactly, how to do it, but to do what they call adapt and conquer.
Right. Yeah. My son is deaf in one ear. He was born that way. And so we did have to accommodate. And I was always talking to him on the wrong side. He says, "Mom, you're on the wrong side again." Or he'll put in just one earphone and people will think he can hear them, but he can't. He only uses it on his good ear. And you have to expand and think and consider the other person, making sure that they're capable and able to do things. So, oh God, this is hard. So today we're on a summit for the Natural Health Collaborative Summit, And how do you see the connection between holistic health and inclusivity in the disability advocacy?
Well, I know this is an interview with me, but I just want to make a quick little nugget referencing you. We haven't said yet that you're, a chef and you're about cooking, but you and I have talked before about how in the kitchen space or in the cooking activities, there's things to consider how in your field cooking is available to people like chefs with disabilities to look at that whole aspect. And then we have our friend here at the Natural Health Collaborative that is our gardening grandma. And I know that's a whole huge field that with gardening, which, Patrice knows, about this aspect about how to make, gardening accessible to people with disabilities, like raised garden beds. So if somebody's a wheelchair user, they can come up and participate at shoulder level or at least upper body level up at their torso, that they could participate in gardening and not have to worry that the garden's at their foot, while they're going out to a garden. So there's all sorts of considerations. And then to look at how we're educational at the Natural Health Collaborative or anywhere where there's holistic health stuff going on, how are we making our lessons to be learned in the format that a learner with a disability needs it to be? So there's all sorts of things. If you have, a participant or a learner who is blind or visually impaired, is everything verbalized? If somebody's deaf or hard of hearing, do you have enough visuals that your message sent is message received through the visual format? And to look at sign language interpretation. We as a society, we really need to, around the world, really figure this out together. How are we going to be really equitable for people who are deaf or hard of hearing by figuring this out with sign language interpretation? Because right now we really only have about, I'd let the deaf and hard of hearing community say for themselves, but I feel that if we could have 33 times more sign language interpreters available, that's really the type of statement that needs to be made around the world, that we're not even close making this world work the way it should be for the deaf and hard of hearing community, that they can come and do what they want to do like anybody else on the planet. Right now, the deaf and hard of hearing community constantly has to evaluate, like you say, even for the Natural Health Collaborative or any of these groups, is it really worth it to try to bridge that gap, that it's not formatted for them? And it's not something that I do as an onus on any one of these individual examples. It's something where that is something that I see the entire society and community needs to retool and rethink about, because we got to approach it at a whole new level, a quantum leap level of commitment for the deaf and hard of hearing community. And that's something I learned in the last 10 years myself in my life.
While you're saying that, I'm thinking we don't have captions turned on. Do we need to turn on captions?
Yeah, I do on my side. So yeah, with you doing the recording, that would be a good idea to.
So is that AI companion? How do I turn on captions?
No, you should be able to see, there should be a closed captioning icon.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. It's in my 3 dots. So English, full transcript or caption settings. Interesting.
You just want to make sure that it is accessible. You click show captions, where like on my screen, my option is hide captions because I already did the show captions. Right. And you did it right because the words are coming up as we talk. Okay. So that's what I've got on my screen. So this is a good example because we have the tools right in front of us, but 3 out of 4 people, don't put these types of practices, in their routine and habits. We're not habitually doing them. We're not holding each other accountable, to do all these things. So again, it's no criticism on any one person. People with disabilities don't want to come in and be that onus, for people, but if we can more voluntarily and more proactively, make this happen so that people with disabilities don't have to ask for it. That's really what it. People with disabilities are really, really discouraged from having to ask for everything that they need all throughout every day. It's really exhausting.
It is. We went through that because my son also has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. and it's real. It's been diagnosed with the professionals. Plus, his dad has it, and you can see it in his dad's father as well, because one of the true signs is that it's hereditary. I think there's environmental ADD too, but we'll talk about that another day. And, it's just getting him accepted in places. It's what they call a hidden disability. But we have captions on now. So that's a good thing. And I'll leave that on. I'll leave that on for people. I tend to read it, so I don't have it on usually because I'll tend to read as opposed to look at the person I'm talking to. But it does get tiring to explain things over and over. My son doesn't like it. He doesn't tell people, I'm deaf in one ear. He just moves around for his environment. So how can wellness professionals such as nutritionists, therapists, fitness experts create more inclusive spaces?
Well, the key component that I learned in a very roundabout way is, we as people, when we learn something, like you and I were talking about ChatGPT when we came in here.
Yes.
You learn something, put it to practice. You showed me how you're putting it to practice. ChatGPT is helping us conduct this interview, or at least in the preparation of it. And so I view accessibility, accommodation, all these things that, happen, like I do adaptive water skiing. We can always go out there and just do it, which there is a lot of that. But what I was taught from self-advocates is, people remind us that, hey, I'm the one that lives with this every day. If I'm participating with you, I've got a pretty good idea, how this needs to go. Because I'm doing my thing every day, so people with disabilities want, that type of involvement in whatever, you as a nutritionist or, you as a chef or, people in wellness or whatever, to do it without people with disabilities. They say nothing about us without us, but it's a very self-determination type of fashion. So like, you were sharing about how someone can, like we're talking about how it's frustrating to always have to explain yourself. So you don't go into it like, give me a full workshop on how to do things with you, or expect that they're going to want to make a lot of comments. So it's a check-in to say, would you like to help me? Would you like to give me an idea? Do you have an idea? And then to survey to say, would you like to be a part of making this that it works for all of us, not just some of us. And, and a lot of times it's about thinking beyond, what we're doing right in front of us. But otherwise, there's like, go to ChatGPT, to say, are we going to ChatGPT and how can I do this better for people who are deaf or hard of hearing? What does ChatGPT say? To go to any resource you can gather. Here in the States, in the US, there are disability resource centers that tend to be available in a local sense. States tend to have councils that you can call on. The U.S. also has, what's called ADA centers for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you on the Canadian side, I would guess there's some sort of agency structure and, local organizations and such. So looking all that stuff up, making that effort, doing your homework, whether going to the library, it's, go after like you do any topic, to make it work. And in networking, make this a part of topics. When you're in different networking, be the group that if your Chamber of Commerce or something isn't talking about these things, not just for your wellness or, holistic health or, anything on your end, get insights from how other professionals are doing it with their field. And then it's like cross training, something somebody's doing as, a book publisher. Might be interesting to be like, oh, they're doing something. And then you figure out how to apply it to, your practice.
Yeah, I think the ChatGPT is an interesting thing because someone could just put in, find this type of organization in my community, and ChatGPT is going to look at different sources that are available. We use the Speech and Hard of Hearing Association a lot. There's a Learning Disability Association, and I learned how to keep a file on my son so that I had all the paperwork together in binders. And by the time he graduated from school, I had 3 binders of reports, and I would go into the meetings. There was one meeting, there was like 6 or 7 of us, and there was only 2 of us that knew my son. And I had pictures in my binder of him, so I put that in the middle of the table. And you could just see people realize this is a real person we're talking about in the meeting. And also, if they didn't have a report, I could pull it out of my binder because I had all of the information together. So yeah, it's really good to get in touch with the different organizations in the community because they offer so much assistance. Like there was parent support groups. There was one that was quite negative, so I moved on to a different one. You got to figure out what suits you, what works into your schedule, and get the information that you need. But ChatGPT is one of my friends just keeps telling, every time I talk to her, she's telling me about what she's gathered from using GPT, and it's just like, so I did that. And like when I pulled up your bio and it had like 5 different sources, it would have taken me half a day or more to find all that information. And all I do is put in your name and ask for a profile, and it pulls up all these resources and just poof, and it organizes it and puts in categories. So I think this is a really good idea for people that are trying to put together information to find assistance for themselves or for somebody that they're providing support for.
Yeah. Imagine being a computer user with a disability and say it's a little bit more of a process to do research and searching and preparation. How much it's an accommodation, assistive technology for people with disabilities. So we appreciate it, being people, quote unquote, people that are able-bodied, or we don't report a disability, we don't claim a disability, but so then there are people with certain functional disabilities that it just accentuates the benefit. It's just to a much larger magnitude, the benefit they're getting, that it works slick.
But at the same time, they need a computer that works, and they have to understand how to stay safe on the computer, and they also need access to the internet, which some rural communities still don't have. I think they're working on it, but there's areas that don't have very much access to the internet. So that's another accommodation issue. And I think the libraries sometimes have public access, but then again, you need to educate yourself about how to stay safe with your information using a public computer.
Transportation concern, because if you've got a physical disability and they don't drive themselves, and you say their access is at the library, well, then we as a society have a responsibility to say, during reasonable hours every day, they need to have access to the library, or during the library's hours, how can they access the library throughout all of the hours of the library, getting from where they live? The library, is transportation that reliable? Otherwise, we need to rethink their access to the internet and everything else.
Well, going back to the holistic health, have you come across any innovative or holistic health solutions that have significantly benefited people with disabilities?
Well, the idea with accessibility and inclusion, and you're talking about health, and let's look at diet, and say you have events and there's food service. What people do at events, or like you're a chef, the way that we can attend to food allergies is important, because the whole idea of inclusion is there's something we're doing that is prohibiting a next person to participate. You were talking about flowers, where the scent, that could be something that doesn't work for us. There's chemical sensitivity, so then there's like EMF waves and stuff like that. So all of these things, are health factors. And when we constantly are stressing someone to their health profile, that we're not fashioning it in a way that really serves how they thrive. And then, like you were talking about the computer access and those topics, what you spoke about is the same consideration for everybody. Mm-hmm. But the nuance is that people with disabilities tend to be out of sight, out of mind, in a ginormous way. So people are going forward with their life, not thinking of these aspects, we're educating a lot of people. But then if you ask, with what you just shared, how many people with disabilities receive that message that you just put out? So there's a bias that people that don't identify with these disabilities tend to not be in the audience, which is a huge issue. Yeah. We have a breakdown in how, and how we're evolving and how community is adjusting, stuff like this. Like when you mentioned about my role with the Wisconsin Council on Physical Disabilities, we put together an emergency preparedness toolkit. And I used to be an EMT for 10 years, pre-hospital care. And, and I really learned through the council that even though I wasn't anymore an EMT, I thought back to my decade as an EMT. I never realized how scary it is for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, that we're all out there in an emergency saying, go down to the alley, seek shelter, do this, do that. Everything's verbalized. Mm-hmm. That what our council did is worked with the Council for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and the state of Wisconsin started to put into distribution some cards, some cheat sheet cards, like things you're trying to say when you're in an emergency, or even if a police officer pulls you over, they may not realize that part of the deterrent is the person is deaf or hard of hearing, and then it allows interaction because the officer, when I was an EMT, could respond. And I think the same thing is in these topics, in terms of wellness and health, and then some of their medical condition is exacerbated by, their diet or, lack of, like water skiing. Water skiing through the disability community, I learned that it's therapeutic recreation. So to be able to have somebody who's a wheelchair user be able to get out of their wheelchair, to be able to be on a sit ski, to be able to be pulled around the lake, on a sit ski is so therapeutic. Yeah. Versus just being cooped up at home, in an indoor environment, so we have to help get people with disabilities out into the green spaces, into Mother Nature, and be able to do so in a safe way that they're never caught in an emergency. And then you're up against, emergencies are really tough for a lot of people with disabilities. It's like, exponentially scarier.
That's an excellent, Tom.
And to get the help and even what's that?
Oh, you paused for a second and I started talking.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an excellent idea. Like just assuming that someone can hear you when maybe they can't, and if there was a loud explosion, even it might even be temporary. That they lose their hearing. I have a friend that works for the St. John's Ambulance, and I'm going to ask him if he's got that kind of training about dealing with people with those kind of issues. So what are EMF waves?
Oh, those are electromagnetic fields. So like right now I'm on a computer. So some of the pauses on my computer is because the EMF waves over to the router is in the air, like all these smart homes where you can, through your cell phone, have control to, your thermostat and everything. So all that stuff we put in the air to have all this wireless stuff. Where that the fields, all that stuff out in the air, people have sensitivity to that, and it shuts down their internal systems because they can't tolerate that stuff going through our bodies. Like the signals from the cell towers and stuff like, it sounds good to have 5G networks and everything, but that is a challenge for our bodies to tolerate all of that digital technology coming through our bodies. That's a huge health concern. That's risky business that we live that way in these days.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right. What upcoming projects or initiatives are you working on that align with health, accessibility, and community wellness?
There's a few components. Part of what I do is in media. So my whole aspiration that I love what we're doing right now, putting these conversations and have video representation and however it's available for mass distribution. This is what I live for these days. So, I'm working on a couple of events that are telethons. One is with CARES Foundation, which is something on distracted driving and helping people on substance use and drug addiction and stuff like that. And then another one is with a group called People for a New America that has an amazing wellness platform, but we're applying it to the veterans community first. So when you're talking about PTSD or like just the life of a veteran, or we have a lot of homeless vets, how do we do all this stuff for people who have home insecurity? They don't have all the luxuries like you and I are at our home.
Yes.
Everybody's thinking we have this. Like you can check it off the box. Everybody that we're doing this for has a home. Well, what about everybody that, our society, leaves living in the street? Maybe they make that choice or whatever, but primarily that's the issue is we have to figure out how we help people get out of poverty and get the jobs and be able to do the things we're doing so that they can have the income to be able to have all these health choices in the first place. So we're doing some events like that to kind of get some organizational collaboration and stuff like that, to amass the population's attention to these things and do it in telethon format, under the idea of what's paid gets done. You got to have a budget for a lot of things we want to do, right? So we're doing telethon.
Okay. And when do you think that will be happening?
We have the CARES Foundation event is Saturday, April 12th, and the People for a New America with the Veterans First Initiative will be Saturday, May 3rd. And they're both 9 to 5 Pacific time.
So when these videos get posted to YouTube, we can put the links into the comments. I've seen people do that. And
they'll be the YouTube videos will be available live on those Saturdays, April 12th and May 3rd on those Saturdays. And if people miss the Saturday lives, then it'll still be in YouTube for Sunday after and ongoing. So yeah.
But for our interview purposes, they'll be posted on YouTube, and we can put the links to your events into those YouTube videos.
Yeah. Yep, I got you. The cross-referencing from this here, with our March event. You bet.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions. If you could share one key message about the importance of natural health for people of all abilities, what would that be?
Well, I guess it's to speak to, maybe to make a bold statement on the overuse of allopathic medicine. If we think of our government benefits and our insurance systems, and like I just said, what's paid gets done. When you have someone with a disability on disability benefits and so forth, let's ask ourselves, what are the agencies, what are our governments tending to fund and pay for? It's allopathic medicine. It's pharmacy. It's pharmacia, right? So this is something where as citizens and as taxpayers, we need to find out how in our bureaucratic systems we can all create a shift. It takes a long time to enact change through what I'm talking about, so that way that's something that definitely is where attention can be served. And then in terms of nonprofits, to then look at the role of nonprofits, at the for-profit practitioners of holistic health, naturopathic medicine, and all this stuff, lifestyle medicine, the whole gambit of all this. We need to think about our ability to deploy to a lot of our populations is pretty, I might even say nil, pretty negligible. So that's where we need nonprofits to come in, and we work with nonprofits to help fundraising of nonprofits, and we can start to see that people can have access to all of these services and all of these products product alternatives because they're able to have it scholarshiped or charitably provided. That's very key. So to have events where people with disabilities can come and they can leave with more natural products and, more holistic approaches to the health they want, so that they don't need that allopathic side of it that they're getting from government. And again, I call for government to change. We need government to provide naturopathic, natural, holistic, lifestyle medicine type programs and products. Otherwise we're not evolving if we don't do that. We have to evolve our government. But while we're waiting for that, let's do it in the private sector, team up on the public side with nonprofits, and let's get to it now. We got to do it in coalitions.
Yes, the pharmaceutical companies have a lot of power and a lot of influence on the doctors. And to be able to go to a naturopath, like where I live, you have to pay separately. And people aren't used to that. And then, like you say, some people don't have the funds to pay for that. So how do you get better if you don't have like good natural food? You don't have the resources, like we were talking about computers and access to information to find the holistic type. But also, like, I'm learning about, what did I use? Oh, a poultice. I had an infection on my arm, and I looked up how to make a poultice, because I went to the doctor and I got medication, but it still wasn't really improving. And I made a poultice with just stuff I had in the kitchen. It was mustard and honey and ginger, a couple of other things. And I put it on my arm with some cheesecloth over it that we had. And my arm got better. And my husband had a sore that wasn't getting better, and he put the poultice on. And it's just so simple, but where do you learn that? Like, unless you're sort of aware of it or consider it, then it doesn't happen. It's hard to change that. I was listening to someone yesterday, and she said we have to go back to our ancestors and how they lived. And part of that is very natural health. So I think that's where our health collaborative comes in. And I'm very thankful for Cindy Olson putting this together and encouraging us all to keep involved and giving us avenues to interact and share our information. So just like to thank you today Kurt for this interview and sharing information and learning about each other some more. It's been fun. And thank you. It's good.
You're very welcome.